Good morning, everyone, and I am so glad you are all here as we're getting started back up. We're in Genesis chapter 28 this morning, and I'm going to go ahead and read for a little bit, and then we'll go ahead and go forward from there. My kitty is actually being very affectionate this morning, so if she hops up and down, I hope that doesn't distract me too much. See? So let's go ahead and let's try this. Genesis chapter 28. So Isaac called for Jacob and blessed him. Then he commanded him, "Do not marry a Canaanite woman. Go at once to Paddan Aram, to the house of your mother's father, Bethuel. Take a wife for yourself there from among the daughters of Laban, your mother's brother. May God Almighty bless you and make you fruitful and increase your numbers until you become a community of peoples. May he give you and your descendants the blessing given to Abraham, so that you may take possession of the land where you now reside as a foreigner, the land God gave to Abraham." Then Isaac sent Jacob on his way, and he went to Paddan Aram, to Laban, son of Bethuel, the Aramean, the brother of Rebekah, who was the mother of Isaac and Esau. Now, okay, so I want to go ahead and stop right there, and we need to talk about this. So we have this blessing that Isaac is giving Jacob. Now, he has already given Jacob a blessing, and I want us to go back and look at that in chapter 27. Remember when Jacob stole the blessing of Esau, and then Esau got a different blessing. Now, I want to make sure and read the original blessing that he had stolen. So what he had stolen was this blessing. Just a minute. Whoa, that's not exactly where I was. Oh, yes, here it is, right here. In 27, verse 20, starting sort of at verse 27, but we're going to go ahead and start at verse 28. "May God give you heaven's dew and earth's richness, an abundance of grain and new wine. May nations serve you and peoples bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may the sons of your mother bow down to you. May those who curse you be cursed, and those who bless you be blessed." Now Esau found out that his father had given away his blessing to his brother Jacob. That was the original blessing given to Esau that Jacob stole. Now that's different than the blessing we just read in 28. Now, what was the blessing that Esau was then given later was something that was not either one of these blessings. It goes, "His father Isaac answered Esau, 'Your dwelling will be away from the earth's richness, away from the dew of heaven above. You will live by the sword, and you will serve your brother. But when you grow restless, you will throw his yoke from off your neck.'" Now, Esau had just said to Isaac, "So, don't you have another blessing, Father?" And he gave him this blessing about your dwelling will be away from the earth's richness, etc. Why didn't he give Esau this blessing that he gave the third blessing? So here we have blessing number one that Jacob stole. And then we have the blessing that Esau was given in place of the blessing that was stolen from him. And here we have the third blessing that is indeed different from both of the others. Isaac is not reiterating the first blessing that he had given to Esau. This is a different blessing. Let me read it to you again. The blessing that he gave to Jacob, knowing it was Jacob, that Jacob did not steal. "May God Almighty bless you and make you fruitful and increase your numbers until you become a community of peoples. May he give you and your descendants the blessing given to Abraham, so that you may take possession of the land where you now reside as a foreigner, the land God gave to Abraham." Oh my goodness. So there was a third blessing. There was a blessing he could have given to Esau, this blessing, but he didn't. Why? Why didn't he give Esau this blessing? He gave Esau a different blessing from the very beginning. So both of the blessings we've had here at the beginning, neither one were intended for Jacob. The first one was stolen. The second one he gave to Esau. We still haven't heard Jacob's blessing. When he knew it was Jacob, we didn't hear that blessing yet. This is the blessing that Isaac knew he was going to be giving to Jacob, or he would have given it to Esau when he knew it was Esau. And so all of this idea about of Jacob being the chosen one for the covenant to flow through, it was never intended that this blessing go to Esau because it never went to Esau. Isaac knew that Jacob was the covenant son. He wasn't the firstborn son. And so the blessing he stole was an earthly blessing. It wasn't the spiritual blessing. It was the earthly blessing. The covenant blessing had always been reserved for Jacob. Jacob didn't steal that blessing. Jacob did not steal the covenant. Wow. Oh my goodness. Okay, so I had never heard that before until the Lord showed that to me this week, and I hope you're as blown away as I am. So what happened to the blessing that Jacob stole? Did Jacob receive any of this? May God give you the heavens dew and earth's riches and abundance of grain and new wine. May nations serve you and peoples bow down to you. Well, eventually that did happen. Be Lord over your brothers, and may the sons of your mother bow down to you. May those who curse you be cursed, and those who bless you be blessed. Now, some of that did come to pass, but you see, that was Esau's blessing. So what did the boys' lives look like after this? Personally, their lives did not reflect this stolen blessing. What happened to Jacob's life is he ended up having to run. He ended up having to escape from his brother's plot to have him murdered. That was Jacob's life. And then Jacob continued to live under this idea and this guise of being a deceiver. He caused all kinds of problems with his family that he went and married into as well. But this was not what God intended for him. What happened here? The family unit was so fractured because of what Rebecca had done and influenced her son to do in order to fulfill what she knew the Lord had told her at the beginning about the boys. The Lord had said the younger one's going to serve the older one. And when she saw Isaac begin to bless Esau as the older one, she began to manipulate and try to take it under her control in order to make God's plans come about. Boy, we saw that before, didn't we? With Sarah and Hagar. Didn't we already see this happening? So now here's another mom trying to manipulate the situation to make sure that God's plan happens. And she never sees this son again. After they send Jacob off, and she knows he's fleeing for his life. His father didn't know he was fleeing for his life, but she knew he was fleeing for his life because the family had been so fractured by her manipulations and by Jacob's cooperation with it, that he fled from Esau and never saw either one of his parents alive again. Oh my goodness, my heart just broke when I realized that Jacob could have received the rightful earthly blessing from his father, having not stolen anything, because Isaac reserved the covenant blessing for Jacob all along. That blessing was the blessing that was for Jacob. If it wasn't, he would have given the covenant blessing to Esau. And then when Esau came to him and said, don't you have any more blessings? He did have a blessing. He had the covenant blessing, but it was tucked back. He knew he couldn't give it to Esau. It still belonged to Jacob. So this was a blessing that Jacob had not stolen. This was a blessing that was designed for him, because from the beginning, God knew where the Messiah was coming through. And so he brought it through Jacob, regardless of Jacob and Rebekah's manipulation. Wow, what an amazing truth, and what a disaster for Jacob's life that he tried to steal something that did not belong to him because something greater belonged to him. Oh Lord God, please help us not to try and manipulate our situations. The lesson for us is not to manipulate our situations, but to let the Lord work out for us his promises in our life. When we see a promise the Lord has given to us and then we try to make it happen, that's when disaster happens. When the Lord gives us a word, when the Lord gives us a promise, he is faithful to fulfill it. We don't have to try and fulfill it for him. What? Even in Jacob's life, if he had left it alone and trusted the Lord as he should have, his earthly life would not have been one of running and hiding and being fearful. That would have been erased from him. And he would have just lived in the blessing the Father had given to him, his earthly blessing and the covenant blessing. But the beautiful thing is the Lord still gave him the covenant. The Lord still passed on the covenant because the Lord is faithful to his promises even when we're not faithful to him. Whoa. Oh my goodness. What an idea. There's so much there. If you can't wrap your mind around it, neither can I, because I'm still processing all of that. Amazing. The blessing of the covenant was not stolen. It was something the Lord designed. And it's something that Isaac gave to Jacob and would not give to Esau, even when given the opportunity. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's go forward. So Jacob left Beersheba and set out for Haran. When he reached a certain place, he stopped for the night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones there, he put it under his head and lay down to sleep. He had a dream in which he saw the stairway resting on the earth and its top reaching to the heavens, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. There above it stood the Lord, and he said, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land on which you are lying. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and to the east, to the north and to the south. All the peoples on earth will be blessed through you. Now, see, that's the part of the covenant we especially get to enjoy in. All the peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. I am with you and will watch over you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. So God goes on ahead and confirms what Isaac has told him, because Isaac has said, may he give you, your descendants, the blessing given to Abraham. And so then God steps in and does indeed give that same promise, the covenant promise, to Jacob. He confirms it right here, just as it belonged to Jacob from the beginning. So I want you to, again, grab a hold of that this was not a stolen promise. Jacob stole something that didn't belong to him, and it never did belong to him. Because as his life went on ahead and bore out, those things that were promised to him in that original blessing were not ones that he got to grasp in his lifetime. Okay, so he continued on his journey, and when Jacob woke up from his sleep, he thought, surely the Lord is in this place, and I was not aware of it. He was afraid and said, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. Early the next morning, Jacob took the stone he had placed under his head and set it up as a pillar and poured oil on top of it. He called that place Bethel, though the city used to be called Luz. Okay, when Jacob made a vow saying, if God will be with me and will watch over me in the journey I am taking and will give me the foods to eat and clothes to wear, so that I return safely to my father's household, then the Lord will be my God. Isn't that interesting? You put that stipulation on it. Lord God, I trust you, but I'm going to go ahead and I will really trust you if these things come about. If all your promises come true, then I'll know that you really are my God. And this stone that I have set up as a pillar will be God's house. And of all that you give me, I give you a tenth. So Jacob is making this internal promise to himself and to the Lord that he will serve the Lord if the Lord indeed is faithful to the things he heard through the night. And of course the Lord was, and he was his God. And then he gave him a tenth of everything. Isn't it interesting? That is before the law. People say, well, tithing is about the law. This is way before the law. This is something about our relationship between us and God. I'm not going to try to say that I want to guilt anyone who has not agreed with this, but I want you to understand that it's bad theology to say that giving a tenth of what we have to the Lord as an offering, as a tithe, meaning tenth, that is law. It wasn't law. It was something the Lord put in Abraham's heart. It's something the Lord put in Isaac's heart. It was an internal thing that the Lord put in Jacob's heart. It was not a part of the law. It was a part of the relationship, a part of the covenant relationship, as we still have today. And so I want you to make sure to know that. So Jacob said all of this to the Lord. He promised all these things, and then he continued on his journey. So I just want to kind of give you a few facts about the journey that he was going on. He had left his parents in Beersheba, and he's going to Haran. So that is a trip that was about just under 580 miles. So it would have taken him, if he was walking, it would have taken him probably 25 to 30 days. And that's if the weather was good, if he didn't have a day that he needed extra rest. If he traveled 8 hours a day and he was a pretty quick walker the entire time. So he was about a month away from his family, which is a significant amount of time to be traveling on foot, really. And so when he's crying out to the Lord saying, if you provide me food on this journey and all the way across the desert, and right now these two places, of course, Beersheba is in Israel. And then as he walked up through Damascus, through all the way through Syria and into Turkey, which is modern-day Turkey, the southern part of Turkey. So this was, excuse me, this is the same journey that Abraham took that now he's taking back up. Isaac never went that far away. The furthest that Isaac traveled in his lifetime was probably 200 miles total, but this one journey is almost 600 miles. Just for a little bit of information there. Okay, so let's go ahead into 29. Then Jacob continued on his journey and came to the land of the eastern peoples. There he saw a well in the open country. Interesting. So he's been walking for a month, and he happens upon this well in the open country, so there's not really a town close by, and 3 flocks of sheep lying near it because the flocks were watered from that well. The stone over the mouth of the well was large. When all the flocks were gathered there, the shepherds would roll the stone from the well's mouth and water the sheep. Then they would return the stone to the place over where the mouth of the well was. And Jacob asked the shepherds, "My brothers, where are you from?" "From Haran," they replied. He said, "Do you know Laban, Nahor's grandson?" Okay, so he's like, okay, I've walked in this general direction for 30 days, and I'm at this well that's out in the wilderness. Would you happen to know, I don't know, maybe this is a really far-fetched idea. I know you're from New York City. Would you happen to know my cousin? It was kind of that thing. I've traveled all of these. If we had traveled 30 days, even in a car, we would end up, if you were in, say, in the southern part of the United States, and if you drove by car, it would take you about that long, maybe not even that long, to get all the way to the very end of Alaska, the very tip of it up there, if you could even make it up there by car. And so then just kind of out there, there's nothing going on. There's a little bitty hole-in-the-wall place, and you walk and say, "Would you happen to know my cousin? I heard he moved up here, was from up around these parts." What's the likelihood of that? Okay. So when his reaction is so amazing, and they said, "Yes, we know him." Then Jacob asked, Is he well? Is he still alive?" "Oh, yeah, he is. And here comes his daughter Rachel with the sheep." "Look," he said, "the sun is still high. It's not time for the flocks to be watered. Water the sheep and take them back to pasture." "We can't," they replied, "until all the flocks are gathered." I think he wanted time alone right then, because he knew he was going to break down. He was like, "Can y'all water your sheep and head along?" While he was still talking with them, Rachel came with his father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. When Jacob saw Rachel, daughter of his uncle Laban, and Laban's sheep, he went over and rolled the stone away over the mouth of the well and watered his uncle's sheep. Then Jacob kissed Rachel and began to weep aloud. I guess so. I would have wept aloud too if I had been walking for 30 days, not even sure if I was going to have food or water, hoping I was heading in the right direction. I can't imagine. He didn't have a compass. They didn't have those. Of course, he's watching the stars as he's walking along, I suppose. He's trying to head basically in the right direction when the sun sets and the sun rises. But for him to stumble upon his uncle's daughter, what a miracle. I mean, really, no wonder he wept aloud. Okay, so here we had that treacherous journey, and that's behind him now, and he's all relieved. After Jacob, and we're at middle of verse 14, kind of starting, let me go ahead and start at verse 14 of 29. Then Laban said to him, "You are my own flesh and blood." This is after he'd been taken back to the house. After Jacob had stayed with him for a whole month, Laban said to him, "Just because you are a relative of mine, should you work for me for nothing? Tell me your wages." Now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the older was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah had weak eyes, but Rachel had a lovely figure and was beautiful. Jacob was in love with Rachel a whole month, and he knew he was in love with Rachel a whole month. And so he's committing himself to marry this girl. Of course, is the one that he was sent after to go, that his parents had sent him to go find. And the reason it was 7 years, that seems excessive, but it's very important to understand that in the cultures, even today, when there is a bride price, that you had to come and bring several years' wages. We have a precious youth pastor that just left us to go to be in New York with her husband, that is now her husband, and they are from Kenya, and she still had a bride price that his family had to pay in order to acquire such an amazing woman. And so it would be several years' wages that would accompany these wives that were of great honor. So because he went there basically empty-handed, not even sure if he was going to have food to eat on the way, he went empty-handed. He had to offer this large amount of wage, especially for someone that was as valuable to him as Rachel was. And so that several years' wages would have been in part of the custom of what his family owed her family. And what they would do with those wages usually is that they would take care of what the family had lost from the daughter, whether she was gathering water, they would have to pay someone to gather the water. If she was keeping the house, they would have to then have someone else keep the house and pay them to do that. They would have to acquire someone to take care of the responsibilities that she had been taking care of. And so that's what her value was to the family. And he had to replace for the family her value to the family structure. So that was the whole thing about the bride price. And that's what it would have been in keeping. And I don't think really from the beginning that Laban expected that he was going to give him Leah. I think the 7 years gave him a cushion. Well, maybe somebody will come along for Leah. But when no one did, of course, we go ahead and we know the rest of the story, is that as he goes ahead into his bride week and goes and he wakes up the next morning. Let me go ahead and let's read that. They got married, and when morning came, there was Leah instead of Rachel. So Jacob said to Laban, "What is this you've done to me? I served you for Rachel, didn't I? Why have you deceived me?" I'm not sure when they did the switch. Now, it is the custom of these Eastern peoples that the bride, she's completely covered throughout the ceremony. And then when after the next morning, when they come out as a couple, or they come to the wedding feast after it's been consummated, then her face is revealed. So maybe that was the custom at that time. That would be my understanding, that that's why he wouldn't have known. And the tent was dark. I mean, you just kind of speculate going, and maybe he had had a little bit too much to drink. I don't know. But he didn't realize until morning who it was that he had actually been with the night before, and the deed had been done. And Laban replied, "It is not our custom here to give the younger daughter in marriage before the older one." I mean, that would have been the custom everywhere. And Jacob knew that. "Finish this daughter's bride a week, then we will give you the younger one also in return for another 7 years' work." So now he's a bond servant to go ahead and get both daughters. It was going to take him 14 years. And Jacob did so. He finished the week with Leah, and then Laban gave him his daughter Rachel to be his wife. Laban gave his servant Bilhah to the daughter Rachel as her attendant. Jacob made love to Rachel also, and his love for Rachel was greater than his love for Leah, and he worked for Laban another 7 years. So she was very valuable to him. And that really what he did was he worked 14 years for Rachel. He never did work for Leah. And so here we have set up this internal family struggle. The oldest pit against the youngest. Once again, when the Lord saw that Leah was not loved, he enabled her to conceive, but Rachel remained childless. And I'm sure that Leah probably conceived during that first week, because I doubt that he went back into her for quite some time. Now, he would have owed her as a husband. As a matter of fact, she could have divorced him if he had not gone back into her and given her the opportunity to become pregnant from time to time. And so that would have been something he would have regularly done in order to keep there from being disgrace against him in the whole family structure. Now, Leah continues to have children. She has 4 children, and then she stops having them. When Rachel saw that she was not bearing Jacob any children, she became jealous of her sister, so she said to Jacob, "Give me children or I will die." Well, Jacob became angry with her. "Am I in the place of God who's kept you from having children?" This is a very interesting struggle that's going on in Rachel's life now. So then they start the handmaidens off back and forth. Bilhah and Zilpah start having children. And Leah has another couple. And then it goes ahead in verse 22 of chapter 30. Then God remembered Rachel. He listened to her and enabled her to conceive. She became pregnant and gave birth to a son and said, "God has taken away my disgrace." She named him Joseph and said, "My Lord, may the Lord add to me another son." So she was already anxious to try and catch up. But this idea that God remembered Rachel, that's always disturbing, because it's the same idea of when God remembered Noah. Now, the thing that's important to understand when I really look closely at this verse, because it It bothers me to think that God had forgotten her. It's not the idea of forgotten and then remembered. It's more like God took a memorial, a record. He kept a remembrance of her. So like whenever we set up a memorial and we say, we're not going to forget, and we build this thing, whether it be some sort of we put a plaque out there, or, you have a stake in the ground and it has this information on it. It was that God put a stake there on Rachel, a tag, a banner over her that said, I'm not going to forget you. I'm remembering you. But for this time later, God remembered that it was a deep understanding of placing a tag on her, placing a banner over her life. And this power, this sign, this distinguishing mark that he put on her was directed toward Rachel specifically, that he would hear her out here. He would hear her out here later, that he would listen. He was listening to her cry, and that he wasn't ever forgotten, that he put a banner over her life to open up her womb now. And isn't it interesting how the Lord creates ways of building our character that can be very painful? And for Rachel, this is what this was. And it's like, Lord, help me to be the woman you want me to be, but just don't make it very painful. Please make it to where I don't have to suffer very much. And that is what happened here with Rachel, because if Rachel had had the love of her husband and began to bear children, how cruel would that have been to Leah? I think sometimes in our suffering and the things the Lord is teaching us, that he's doing it not only for our benefit and our character and for our development, but he's doing it for the love of someone else. So if you are facing a difficult time, if you feel like that the Lord has let you down in some way, if you feel like he has forgotten you, he hasn't forgotten you. He's putting a banner, his banner of love over you. But why am I going through all of this? Maybe it's not just for your benefit. You're going to benefit from it for his glory and for his honor in your life. I promise you that. And he promises that to us. When we belong to him, he puts a banner of love over us, and he remembers us, and he's building us up for his glory and honor, but also maybe for the benefit of someone else. In Rachel's suffering, the Lord is helping Leah understand her value in his eyes, understand who she is in him. And so as we suffer, as the Lord is building our character, there are those that are being affected by the Lord's work in our lives. And so let us not resist what he's doing for me, through me, not to me, but through me, so that I can then be his servant in every way, even in my suffering. I will receive the Lord's glory and honor through my life, so that he can receive through my life what my life was created for. And so we have this going on in Rachel's life. And it's so hard when we're going through struggles, when we're crying out to God saying, Lord, I think I've been forgotten. And the Lord's like, no, I put a tag in you. I put a banner over you. And your time of renewal, all those things, the suffering you go through right now is for your benefit and for my glory and for the benefit of those who are around you. There might be times in our lives that we come into a place where we feel like, Lord, I cannot sustain this. And then at that point, the Lord is like, you have become my wounded healer. And in your life, a dear precious pastor's wife, a friend of mine, told me one time that now that you're bearing this burden with me, this burden that I also have, and this thing has happened in your life, the Lord has made you a wounded healer. So if the Lord is allowing wounds, or maybe it's not the Lord that is in any way, maybe it's someone else's sin, maybe it's something that's going on in our lives that we had absolutely no control over. It wasn't something that we felt like the Lord would have had happen, but the Lord will use it. He will allow our wounds to heal those around us. So embrace it and let it flow through you. Let your wounds, let the things that come into your life flow through you as a healing balm to those around you. Don't resist what the Lord is willing to do with the things in our lives that are difficult, sometimes unbearable. But the Lord will help us bear it up, and he will receive glory. And we will be able to receive the honor of healing those through our wounds that are around us. Now, I want to make sure and touch on one more thing before we leave today. And that is this idea that we have this struggle of the older against the younger. We have it here with Rachel and with Leah. But where have we seen this before? We've seen this with Isaac when he supplanted Ishmael, really in Ishmael's mind, what is a supplanting? Now, Isaac was the son of covenant. He was the one that the covenant was coming through, just like with Jacob and Esau. Esau was the older, but the covenant was coming through Jacob on purpose. It wasn't ever supposed to come through Esau. Now we have Rachel against Leah. Then we see Joseph with his 10 brothers, and they were all rescued because this younger one rose up, but there was a struggle between the older and the younger. And then we have Ephraim and Manasseh, and then we have David and his 7 older brothers. We have this idea of what would be the natural order of things versus the spiritual order of things. The physical versus the spiritual. Man's plan versus God's plan. We have the first Adam and the second Adam, which is, of course, Jesus Christ. That is the beauty. The first covenant and the second covenant. The first law and the second law. From weakness, from struggling in this human endeavor to the strength of the spiritual things, from small to great. We think about who Israel is, one of the smallest countries in the world, and yet they are the greatest because God's covenant has come through them. The first shall be last, and the last shall be first. This is a theme that we see throughout the Word, and it is to show us a picture of who Jesus is. Adam was the first one created. He was the one who caused all death. Jesus was the one and only Son of God, just like Isaac was the covenant son, so Jesus is the covenant Son of God. And through him, all men are saved. It's always this natural order versus the spiritual order. And so if you feel like maybe your life is topsy-turvy, do not be afraid. Do not be dismayed. The Lord has a plan, and he is working it out in your life. And he will not abandon you. He will not forsake you. He has a banner of love over you, even during times of adversity, even if you have struggles, even when you do, and even when hard things happen, the Lord will not forsake you because he has a plan for your life. And his covenant is resting on and through you. May he receive glory and honor through your life today and for all the days to come. In Jesus' name, amen. Y'all have a very blessed week.